Here in Budoruska, a small locality in the Suwałki region, Bronisław Komorowski sojourned as he learned he was supposed to assume the responsibilities as acting head of state. Komorowski, as his second home, is this place. Based on his later interviews, he was right here when the foreign minister called to inform him of what happened in Smolensk. The Polish constitution provides that the Speaker of the Sejm takes over the head of state responsibilities in such a situation. Komorowski got in the car and headed to Warsaw. On his way, he met the Government Security Bureau officers and once in Warsaw, took the office over. Notifying the public of this fact in a briefing delivered at the same day.
W związku z tym, że konstytucja, artykuł 131 konstytucji...
Since Article 131 of the Constitution tasks the parliamentary speaker with the responsibility to ensure the continuity of the head of the Polish state, I have signed a decision on the national days of mourning. Very soon, Speaker Bronisław Komorowski, acting head of state, embarked on fulfilling the political agenda carried out since 2007 by Premier Donald Tusk and Russia's Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. Opposed by the late President Lech Kaczynski, this political line became the sense and content of Komorowski's activity. This is reflected in the first documents he received from the Foreign Ministry once in office, to mention a memo from the ministry's Eastern Department, dated the 16th of April 2010, paving the way for the coming meeting with Dmitry Medvedev in Kraków during President Kaczynski's funeral ceremony. We are due to meet in completely new historical circumstances, ones that nobody would have conceived or imagined a fortnight ago. I wish to stress most emphatically, we are witnessing a new reality of Polish-Russian relations as initiated by the meeting between the Prime Ministers Donald Tusk and Vladimir Putin in Katyn on April the 7th. This fact being recognized by the head of Poland's government as one of the groundbreaking importance to Polish-Russian relations. The contribution came also in the form of both parties' response to the plane crash in Smolensk of April the 10th this year. It was the funeral of President Lech Kaczynski that offered the opportunity for laying down the schedule of actions that have become epitomic of Bronisław Komorowski's presidency. A presidency of reset. Here is the place of one of the greatest battles ever fought in the history of mankind, and of possibly the greatest Polish victory. Not until the erection of this museum of the Battle of Warsaw would the Polish state establish a token of commemoration of the event. resulting, however, from the talks between Donald Tusk, Bronisław Komorowski and Dmitry Medvedev held on April the 18th, 2010. An idea to commemorate those who fought in that battle cropped up, as was delivered. Not the Polish soldiers, mind you, but the Bolshevik invaders. Now tell us where we are and what we're going to see. We're going to the cemetery that crowns the monument devoted to the hostile army and Bolshevik soldiers who invaded Poland in 1920 and probably fell in that world's 18th and most decisive battle. It was fought right here, in the fields near Ossów, and they were involved in the skirmishes with the victorious Polish army, which successfully resisted the Soviet army marching toward Warsaw in that place. Now I see this is the main place where the Warsaw Battle was resolved. Indeed, as was the fate of Poland and Europe alike. In 2008, as the Warsaw Battle area was under rearrangement, remains of 22 Red Army soldiers were found. Then the Polish authorities decided not to remove them to any of the Red Army cemeteries existing within Poland. Instead, in 2010, an idea was developed and endorsed by President Bronisław Komorowski to solemnly open the venue as a state ceremony. Vladimir Grinin, the ambassador of the Russian Federation, was expected to join. And it almost happened, but a group of protesters finally turned it down. When Grinin was a few hundred meters from the monument, he decided to turn the car back and return to Warsaw. The ceremony was finally recalled.
Ostatecznie uroczystość została odwołana.
Did they carry the cross or the red star? Did they come over to promote culture and Christianity in this country? These are not tombs. It is a monument to those who fought against Poles, intending to trample us down. We were attacked, invaded, and now we are told to celebrate it? The Council Secretary's opinion is different, though. It is a grave and not a monument. That granite obelisk. Respect is owed to those soldiers, mind you, and a place of rest.
Właśnie się próbujemy dostać do pomnika, który Armii Czerwonej postawił Bronisław Komorowski.
We are getting closer to the monument Mr. Komorowski has erected to the Red Army. This is the old road. We've got to the old road. Incredible. Doesn't it tell us everything about what it means to build monuments people care for as much as they care for the Soviet army?
A nie Sowietom.
I should have left this effort on my way to Częstochowa Sanctuary rather than with the Soviet corpses. What does it take for an anti-communist to get a Red Army monument? He is here to see a certificate of betrayal. Indeed, this is awesome. The project was turned down by the protesters, basically. Really incredible. Groups of a dozen people could do it. Stop it all. This monument to the reset is amazing. A deserted monument with no one to take care, nobody to carry the affair forward. Now, see what happens. All those empty claims that a Red Army soldier deserves being honoured, with a cross erected to get overgrown with weeds in some unreachable place. Just incredible. Let's see. There's some old flowers and an inscription.
Kiedy patrzy się na ten napis, tak,
Inscription?
to jest odniesienie do 14
When you look at the
października,
inscription, it refers to August the 14th and 15th, the anti-Bolshevik war, the Battle of Warsaw. After all, the idea stems directly from the documents you have found.
Wprost z dokumentów, które znalazłeś w trakcie...
Moim zdaniem, Michał, moim zdaniem dokumentem fundacyjnym tego, co widzimy przed nami,
Michał, to my mind, the founding document of what we can see at the monument is the conversation between Bronisław Komorowski and President Medvedev of April the 18th, 2010. The former offering himself to extend a better care and respect to the Soviet cemeteries in Poland.
Nad cmentarzami sowieckimi w Polsce, a we wnioskach już spisanych przez Ministerstwo Spraw Zagranicznych jest
The conclusions written down by the Foreign Ministry include a reference to the anti-Katyn issue, as the Russians denote the Red Army prisoners interned POWs of the Polish Bolshevik War of 1920. The narrative went, they needed to be somehow rediscovered and commemorated in some way.
Na nowo jeszcze odkryć i w jakimś sensie upamiętnić.
What was the rationale, to your mind?
To się tak na początku wydawało, ale nie, no dobra, ale jest jakaś logika.
There's no nation that would ever erect such a thing, right where its great victory occurred. For Poland, it is the greatest victory since the Vienna Battle of 1683. This is something contrary to commemoration of the defeat of the Soviet Union in this very land. Poland was actually the only country that defeated the Soviets back then in 1920. No monument, not even a small cemetery dedicated to the invader army seems conceivable. I know of no such nation or battlefield that would have anything like it done.
Nie znam takiego państwa, nie znam takiego pola bitewnego, gdzie by takie coś było.
Before Bronisław Komorowski became a full-fledged president, he acted as a head of state for several weeks. In this capacity, he did his first foreign trip, a trip to Moscow. The opportunity came with May the 9th, the day which the Soviet and post-Soviet Russian tradition call Victory Day, the celebration of this particular anniversary. In President Kaczynski's lifetime, the issue was subjected to a diplomatic and political game aimed by Russia and Donald Tusk's government against the then head of state. At stake was that the president withdraw from his planned visit to Katyn, pretty much awkward a place for Russians, and appear instead in Moscow on the Den Pobedy, in the circumstances thoroughly controlled by the Russians, including in respect of this historical message. Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski tried to persuade President Kaczynski to join that very celebration. Would you please send me a draft of the memo recommending the President to participate in the May the 9th celebration in Moscow?
To był scenariusz prowokacyjny, w który rząd Donalda Tuska, a przede wszystkim minister Radosław
It was a provocative scenario, which the Tusk government and primarily Minister Sikorski tried to impose on the late President Kaczynski. A whole series of materials, documents, memos on the talks of the presidential office members, including with Russian officials, Ambassador Grinin and his representatives emphatically testified that President Kaczynski was hesitant until the last moment. I can recall one absolutely awkward note drafted by Deputy Foreign Minister Andrzej Kremer, based on his talk with Władysław Stasiak of the presidential office. Both were killed in the Smolensk crash, stating that the presidential team, on behalf of the head of state, demands to be clearly notified whether a propaganda parade of Russian troops is planned as part of the May 9th celebrations, featuring the images of Lenin, Stalin and red cloths, altogether forming a great apology of the Russian army.
Takiej propagandowej parady wojsk rosyjskich, w których zostaną wykorzystane wizerunki Lenina, Stalina, czerwone płachty i będzie to generalnie jakaś jedna wielka apologia Armii Czerwonej. I Kremer,
Not really knowing how to reply, Minister Kremer wrote of the progressive de-Stalinization taking place in Putin's Russia and says that he is not aware if such symbols might be used during the ceremony.
Druga kwestia to jest legenda o rzekomym zabraniu czy woli samego prezydenta Lecha Kaczyńskiego, żeby zabrać na pokład i polecieć do Moskwy z Wojciechem.
Another thing is the legend which said that President Lech Kaczynski himself had expressed that he would take Wojciech Jaruzelski with him on board and fly together to Moscow. This is a gross nonsense, a damned lie that has been reappearing until now. Wojciech Jaruzelski received a separate and dedicated invitation from President Medvedev himself, as former head of state, President of the People's Republic and of the Third Republic of Poland, and a World War II veteran, and was supposed to visit Moscow based on this special invitation.
W oparciu o to zaproszenie miał polecieć do Moskwy.
Moreover, the Russian officials invited 4 other veterans to take part in the ceremony, to be selected by the ambassador of the Russian Federation in consultation with the Office for War Veterans and Victims of Oppression. General Jaruzelski was also invited as former head of state and war veteran.
Problemem związanym z zabraniem Wojciecha Jaruzelskiego na pokład rządowego samolotu na uroczystości.
Taking Mr. Jaruzelski on board the governmental airplane going to the Moscow celebrations was problematic also because he'd been accused at that time by the National Remembrance Institution prosecutors for introduction of the martial law back in 1981. There was an issue about what passport he might use on the trip.
Ten scenariusz w zupełnie już innych warunkach pogłębionego resetu realizuje Bronisław Komorowski, lecąc.
The preset scenario was eventually followed, now under the completely different conditions of a deepened reset by Bronisław Komorowski, flying to Moscow in the company of General Stanisław Kozier, former Foreign Minister Adam Rotfeld, movie director Andrzej Wajda, and General Jaruzelski to celebrate the day of Soviet Union's victory over the Third Reich. Komorowski took with him a man sued in Poland for a communist crime. Afterwards, the whole team visited Smolensk and Katyn.
Szklanice rozbijać.
The choice of Moscow as the first capital city to be visited by a politician acting as the President of the Republic of Poland expressly pointed by itself to the character of the change taking place in the Polish political arena. A man who, in contrast to Lech Kaczynski, was to be of obstacle to the development of a strategic alliance with Russia, and who in fact was to significantly and fundamentally contribute to it, became head of state. The Moscow talk between President Medvedev and Speaker Komorowski was an integral part of the scenario we have already mentioned in the context of the talks held in Krakow at Wawel, with the Russians covering up their image in political and mass media terms, as a nation potentially guilty of the Polish plane crash outside Smolensk.
Państwa potencjalnie winnego katastrofy polskiego samolotu pod Smoleńskiem.
Mr. President has demonstrated far-reaching understanding of the need to give Poland, as soon as possible, to reveal its public opinion of flight recorder data, as well as the other material used in the Russian investigation. This is part of the announcement from the Russian party made during the talks. My request to secure the crash area with special care, since mentions have appeared that things, like pieces of the wreckage, or the victims' personal personal belongings may still be found there, has met with positive response as well. Mr. President announced he should call the governor of Smolensk so that the area may simply, forthwith, be fenced.
Pan prezydent zapowiedział swój telefon do gubernatora Smoleńska po to, aby jak najszybciej teren po prostu został ogrodzony.
Prezydent Komorowski, czy pełniący obowiązki prezydent Komorowski dziękuję za postawę Rosji i Rosjan.
President Komorowski acknowledges Russia's and the Russian nation's attitude after the Smolensk crash. Very interestingly, as if he forgot himself, he says that after April the 10th, 2010, we're encountering in Poland a social campaign of tending to Red Army soldiers' cemeteries. Looks like he forgot he had declared such a project in his first talk with President Medvedev. The social campaign of protecting or caring about the Soviet cemeteries was the state propagandist pro-Russian action, ordained from above, with scouts involved by force, for instance.
Prorosyjską, w którą siłą w gruncie rzeczy wciągano na przykład harcerzy.
Komorowski's visit to Moscow offers us the first direct piece of evidence confirming that the policy of resetting the relationship with Russia, pursued since 2007 by the Donald Tusk government, enjoyed full acceptance and support from the top leadership team of Germany. A document to be found in the Foreign Ministry's archive that reports on a talk between Chancellor Angela Merkel and Bronisław Komorowski as they met in Moscow on May the 9th, 2010, displays it quite clearly. We do have a report on that meeting, not a long one, though momentous and significant indeed, I'd say.
Donośną i znaczącą.
Here goes the ciphertext. Special sensitivity ought to be exercised in the relations with one's neighbours. Sounds like encouragement to empathise with the Russians from our side. The way the Prime Minister of the Republic of Poland acted after the April 10th crash is highly appreciated. Remainder that Donald Tusk is to receive the Charlemagne Prize. Good cooperation with the Russians in the investigation of the April 10th crash, cautious optimism as regards the progress of the Katyn massacre investigation. This is an extremely essential, even if brief, communication, now for the first time revealed to the public opinion. In fact, a month after the Smolensk crash, Angela Merkel says in Moscow that Donald Tusk will be decorated with Germany's top honour, since she appreciates his policies towards Russia and finds his attitude after the April 10th incident worthy of mention. How to understand this?
Doceniała politykę prorosyjską Donalda Tuska od początku, od jesieni 2007, ale
I think she appreciated Tusk's pro-Russian policies throughout the process, since the autumn of 2007. However, the most important thing in this context we are discussing is to stress Donald Tusk's pro-Russian policy carried out in extreme conditions, caused by what happened on April the 10th, 2010. All this, obviously, seen from the German standpoint, Chancellor Merkel's perspective. And he did behave as Berlin would have expected, in that he did not step off the road of a reset with Russia. This is of paramount importance given the context. This document is the first that clearly and expressly testifies that the policy of reset with Russia pursued by Donald Tusk since 2007 was fully approved by the top German officials, including Angela Merkel, who watched the process as it went on and offered a prize for it. As per a dispatch received from Polish diplomats reporting on Merkel's words, Donald Tusk would receive Germany's most prestigious award for the way he managed Poland's relationship with Russia. Though the official statement issued in January 2010 suggested that the prize's chapter appreciated Tusk's actions, quote, facilitating Poland's mutual understanding with its European partners. What it meant in practice was the German concept of building the European foreign policy called for an agreement between Poland and Russia. In Merkel's view, Donald Tusk deserved in 2010 Germany's highest federal decoration, in recognition of his pursuance of this very policy.
Niemieckie odznaczenie za prowadzenie takiej właśnie polityki. Myślę, że Polska była wytypowana jako istotny punkt w całej tej rozgrywce przeciwko Zachodowi.
I think that Poland must have been selected as an essential point in that game played against the West. Despite what might seem to us over the years, we've repeatedly heard comments that Poland was an insignificant country in Europe, with no significance in the politics of its neighbours' countries, Germany and Russia. Not a point of reference, nothing of importance at all, just one of the countries in its region. The truth is the opposite. From Russia's standpoint, Poland is critical to certain processes inside Europe, let alone the fact that Russia has always had enormous hang-ups about Poland. For sure, from the perspective of Russia's European policies, Poland is an entity that must be neutralized so that the great projects may be put into practice. President Komorowski's May the 9th, 2010 visit to Moscow, the Russian Victory Day celebration, and the earlier contacts between Donald Tusk and Vladimir Putin yielded the most concrete results. Komorowski's visit meant that Poland has entered direct working relations with the men known to the world for years as assassins. On May the 8th, 2010, the Polish delegation came into contact with Nikolai Patrushev, who was responsible for the bomb attacks inside Russia, resulting from which Putin had come to power. Before his trip to Moscow, General Kozier received a set of materials, including a mostly true portrayal of Patrushev, his interlocutor. Let me quote an excerpt. The blacklist of FSB's achievements during Patrushev's directorship is topped by the mining of a residential building in Ryazan 1999 by FSB soldiers, admitting in 2010 the seizure of the theatre in Dubrovka Street, Moscow downtown area by a Chechen commando that carried out the hostage release operation ended up with a toll of 129 human lives. That during Komorowski's visit to Moscow, a collaboration was set up between the men of the acting president of Poland and Polish intelligence services, on the one hand, and a member of the Russian Corporation of Killers, we can learn from the recently declassified documents of the Polish Foreign Ministry. The course of the meeting leaves no illusion that both the Polish and the Russian team regarded cooperation in the areas Patrushev was in charge of at the Kremlin a priority. Apart from General Stanisław Kozier, the meeting with Patrushev, a long-standing KGB and FSB functionary, was joined by Tomasz Turowski, a long-time agent of Poland's Communist Intelligence Services, member of the intelligence agency in the Third Republic and a major architect of President Kaczynski's fatal visit to Katyn. Regarding the meeting between Stanisław Kozier, head of the National Security Bureau, and Nikolai Patrushev, secretary to the Security Council, on May the 8th, 2010, our delegate, Turowski. At the start, Patrushev mentioned, in the context of the Victory Day, the need to present the true vision of history, stating, "We should have common interest in unbiasedly informing people on the road to our success, while clearly telling them what the price we have paid was." He once again expressed his condolences related to the Smolensk crash and concluded by calling on the parties to build mutual trust between Poland and the Russian Federation, adding that the latter is ready for it. The first Moscow meeting between Kozier and Patrushev was attended also by Tomasz Turowski, the titular ambassador. The name of Colonel Rządza is familiar to our audience. Turowski basically succeeded him in Moscow, but there's no doubt that he delivered tasks also for the intelligence agency. Another delegate present at the meeting was Bartosz Cichocki, General Kozier's close associate, and Anna Majda, interpreter, delegated by the Polish embassy in Moscow. Patrushev was assisted by Vladimir Nazarov, a very important figure in the Russian Federation security system. Tomasz Turowski, as can be seen from his statements at the court as he testified in a Smolensk hearing, wouldn't make secret his associations with the Third Republic's secret services. That man was present in those key places and moments before the Smolensk disaster, in Smolensk during the crash, and 4 weeks later we see him join the conversation with a major figure of the Kremlin, responsible over the years for some of Russia's darkest affairs. Makes one pose the question, to what extent did all this ensue from the activities of the Polish state and its clandestine structures? Well, all I can say now is that the intelligence agency was an active player in Donald Tusk's reset policy after 2007. The men, like Jońca or Turowski, participated in creating the new reality of Polish-Russian relations, not to mention the role of the agency's headquarters. All this should be of no surprise to us. That's all I can tell you for the purpose of this film. I can leave it like that. You're not telling me more now? Yes. Yeah, so let me leave it as it is. The cooperation between Patrushev and the Polish National Security Bureau had long been surprising to Secret Service officers with sound expertise in Russian affairs, an arousing question among them. To me, it was completely incomprehensible, totally unacceptable. It was like the world turning upside down. Poland ceases to be Poland all of a sudden. On the one hand, there's an extremely menacing character, having a hand in the deaths of several people, one who is capable of executing any dirty game. On the other, there's a Polish army general, academic, who mainly wrote theoretical studies on how and with what arms to fight, dwelling on various strategies. He actually had never been involved in a state security project, for state security is not a theoretical issue a professor can successfully handle. State security is a practical issue, and General Kozier definitely lacked practical experience in this respect, as opposed to Patrushev, whose expertise was abundant in the darkest version. So I found the disproportion of those two characters deeply moving somehow, devastating almost. And it was clear that giving away yet another area of Polish reality was at stake. Things that should have remained secret and protected to an extreme degree. Our National Security Agency, its concepts and works, everything that is developed inside it, is fundamental to the state security policy. All this was subject to discussion, avoiding extreme words. It did involve a man involved in the wet work within that system. At the meeting, General Kozier said two amazing things. First, he said that the reason he pays his first foreign visit to Moscow and meets with Nikolai Patrushev because he cares about opening to the strategic goal of developing positive, mutually beneficial relations with Russia.
Pozytywnych, obustronnie korzystnych relacji z Rosją. Twierdzi również, że taki charakter relacji polsko-rosyjskich.
He said that such character of Polish-Russian relations means getting back on track. To quote, in response, Kozier stressed that his first foreign meeting since he took his office, that it takes place at the Kremlin, marks a token of openness to the strategic objective defined as development of positive and mutually beneficial relations with Russia. As he mentioned, the Poles can remember the Soviet soldiers who fell on the Polish soil. He thanked Patrushev for having quickly prepared the meeting. As for the substance, Kozier remarked that there is a chance to put Polish-Russian security contacts on normal track. Hence, the national strategies of Poland and the Russian Federation need being discussed.
Stanisław Koziej na swoim pierwszym spotkaniu z Patruszewem 9 maja 2010 roku w Moskwie.
At his first meeting with Patrushev in Moscow on May 9, 2010, Stanisław Kozier said that Poland's cooperation with Russia is, quote, the invariable strategic aim of the Republic of Poland. It is really astonishing that things have been set like that and articulated at the very outset of that meeting in a way that exceeded the standard departmental palaver.
podziękowaniem za zachowanie Rosjan.
Red Army
po
cemeteries protected,
Smoleńsku,
thanking the Russians for their
poprawie
attitude in
klimatu,
response to Smolensk,
w relacjach dwustronnych.
improved climate of bilateral relations, and, well, as he put it, the obligation to intensify the bilateral strategic dialogue between Poland and the Russian Federation, between the office of Polish president, to be elected by democratic procedure only in several months, mind you, and the office of President Medvedev, represented by Patrushev, is something astounding and hyperbolical, considering the day these words are uttered, May the 9th, 2010.
Na wyrost, jeśli chodzi o samą datę, kiedy te słowa padają, czyli 9 maja 2010 roku.
It was the talks initiated in Moscow on May the 8th, 2010, that led to the conclusion of a set of cooperation agreements between the Russian Federation's Security Council and the National Security Bureau, covering a meeting of joint coordinating team at the deputy head level, chiefly tasked with providing the conditions for dialogue on security issues, implementation of the Russian Federation's national security strategy and military doctrine, strategic review of defence and strategic review of the national security of the Republic of Poland, implementation of the reforms of the armed forces of Poland and Russia.
Patrushev zgodził się do Polski przyjechać i podpisać.
Patrushev agreed to come to Poland and solemnly sign the schedule, a 24-month cooperation agreement between the two institutions at the Security Bureau's office. Together with Kozier, on the 1st of February 2011, two documents were signed. In fact, one being a declaration establishing a dialogue for security between the Bureau and the RF Security Council apparatus. The other was a plan for collaboration between the Bureau and the said apparatus for the years 2011 and 2012. It is pretty important what this agreement provided for: a round table of experts to discuss the relations between NATO and Russia.
Miał powstać okrągły stół ekspertów, którzy mieli dyskutować na temat relacji pomiędzy NATO a Rosją. Współpraca miała dotyczyć wymiany.
The cooperation would be based on exchange of views on Russian Federation's military doctrine, on the strategic defense review and strategic security review to be prepared in Poland at the Bureau and Presidential Office, and on the reform of the armies of Poland and Russia.
Reformy wojska i polskiego, i rosyjskiego.
As a result, Nikolai Patrushev gained regular access to some major Polish politicians of the Civic Platform camp, as we can read in the correspondence kept in the Polish archives. The meeting with President Bronisław Komorowski was of special importance, as it proved that the policy aiming at normalization of Russian-Polish relations has remained unchanged. Of use was the exchange of views with Defense Minister Bogdan Klich and Radosław Sikorski. I consider useful our consultations and the signed cooperation plans between the apparatuses of the Russian Federation's Security Council and the Republic of Poland's National Security Bureau for the years 2011 and 2012. All this will doubtlessly help us work together and in parallel in a much more efficient manner in view of strengthening the international, regional and national security. The agreement entered into by Patrushev and Komorowski resulted in a rapprochement so deep that the former, one of the best-known Russian criminals, described as one of the leaders of the Corporation of Killers, would visit Poland incognito as president of the Russian Volleyball Association. For instance, he appeared in this capacity at a volleyball game between Russia and Brazil in Sopot.
Prezydencki ośrodek w Juracie.
On that same weekend, German Chancellor Angela Merkel paid a private visit, July the 9th, to three cities' conurbation. President Komorowski, staying there since July the 6th, hosted her at the seaside residence. Patrushev watched the Russia-Brazil volleyball match on July the 8th, 2011 in Sopot, incognito, wearing a navy blue polo shirt. He drove a Porsche Panorama with Polish registration plates from a major local car dealer.
Samochodem Porsche Panamera na polskich numerach rejestracyjnych, pochodzącym z autosalonu jednego z najbardziej znanych w Sopocie dealerów samochodowych.
I wonder what the Polish counterintelligence archives would say about it. There should be some reports covering all this. I cannot figure out the Polish counterintelligence not having observed that visit. The presence of the President of Poland in Jurata should not have been an obstacle to observing all the other elements of Patrushev's visit. I hope there is a record somewhere. We might get to know about it someday. What that visit looked like. Russia's confrontation with the Polish counterintelligence certainly ended up in a 3-0 scoreline. The counterintelligence should have never admitted such presence in the territory of Poland. End of story. If forced to do so by politicians, the head of the service should have resigned immediately. Such behaviour is not to be admitted, ever. A man of such stature moving around incognito, having some discreet meetings with Polish dignitaries. You cannot run the counterintelligence given such circumstances. Bronisław Komorowski was made president on the 6th of August 2010. The outcome of the presidential election in Poland is accepted at the Kremlin with moderate satisfaction. For the satisfaction to be complete, the Communist Security Force agent, Wolski, i.e. Wojciech Jaruzelski, should have run for president, as should another such agent, Bolesław Bierut, dead for decades. The list of the potentially best presidents of Poland features other names too. Polish diplomats wrote about it in the cryptograms sent from Moscow to the Foreign Ministry's headquarters. In the Kremlin's view, Beirut was the last entirely satisfactory president. Jaruzelski would have been superior to Komorowski. If Lech Kaczynski was completely unacceptable to Russian authorities, Komorowski was at least 50% fine. Someone of the sort of Leszek Miller would have been the demanded choice.
Uznała jednak wynik tych wyborów za obiecujący, świadczy
That the Russian Federation regarded the election's result as satisfactory was attested by the courtesy visit, also called working visit, paid to Poland exactly on the president's inauguration day by a major Russian Baltic Fleet vessel, namely the assault ship Kaliningrad. From the 6th to the 9th of August, it was moored at the commercial harbour quay in Gdynia. The talks focused on the exchange of experiences related to maritime activities. The Kaliningrad crew explored the ORP Błyskawica destroyer.
Rosjanie są po pierwsze pamiętliwi, a po drugie w swojej politycznej grze.
Russians are unforgiving and vindictive. Second, in their diverse political strategies and games, they refer to historical facts and historical memory. They certainly remembered that Poland's Deputy Minister of Defense once bade farewell to the Baltic Fleet in the Polish port of Świnoujście as part of the Soviet troops' withdrawal from permanent deployment in Poland.
Wojsk sowieckich z stałej obecności na terenie Polski.
And then, on August the 6th, 2010, the inauguration of President Komorowski, the assault ship Kaliningrad arrives at the naval base of Gdynia, and over 100 Russian soldiers are having fun in the three-city area for several days.
W Gdyni. I przez kilka dni ponad 100 żołnierzy rosyjskich bawi się w Trójmieście.
2 września 2010 roku tu, w Krajowej Szkole Administracji Publicznej, pojawił się gość.
On the 2nd of September 2010, Warsaw's National School of Public Administration was visited by not just any guest, Sergei Lavrov, head of Russian diplomatic service. The very fact that one of Vladimir Putin's closest associates appeared in a Polish school educating those who were to be employed with ministries, public offices and institutions and other Polish services might have been astonishing. Lavrov's visit, however, was not an ordinary meeting with students. He turned up invited by the Polish government to attend a special event. It was there that the annual Ambassadors' Conference was held. It was a meeting of the top diplomatic representatives of Poland, who visit the country every year to discuss strategic issues related to Polish diplomacy. Sir Lavrov attended one such meeting and delivered a lecture.
Zaproszony został Siergiej Ławrow i udzielił tutaj...
The main purpose of the Russian guest's visit was his participation in the main panel devoted to Polish-Russian and Russian-EU relations. The participation of Russia's foreign minister came as a rather unusual occurrence, testifying to quite an advanced stage of development of partnership between relations between Poland and Russia. This was furthermore confirmed by the public acknowledgement by the Russian party that Poland is perceived by Moscow as an important member country in the European and Euro-Atlantic integration structures, and as such may serve as a conduit between the European Union and Russia. Dear Mr. Minister, I thank you once again for your arrival, for what you have just said and what you told our ambassadors. It was a good, sincere and substantive discussion regarding the Russian-EU relations.
Jako minister spraw zagranicznych bez zmrużenia oka.
As a Minister of Foreign Affairs, he invites Lavrov without a flick or sense of distaste, not only receiving him as an extraordinary guest, but inviting him that he taught our foreign service how to pursue a foreign policy.
On naszą służbę zagraniczną uczył, jak należy prowadzić politykę zagraniczną. No to jest oczywiście obraźliwe dla polskich ambasadorów. W każdym razie
This is certainly insulting to Polish ambassadors. In any case, for those who had a sense of propriety and duty founded upon their responsibilities. Evidently, Radosław Sikorski must have been highly satisfied, and he perhaps regarded it as his personal triumph, or at least something he could boast in his international contacts. How good is his relationship with Lavrov personally and with Russia in general? Such people are completely deprived of morality on quite a basic level.
No to są ludzie, tak mi się wydaje, no kompletnie wyzuci z moralności i to na tym na jakimś poziomie zupełnie podstawowym.
Minister Sikorski reports his people at the debriefing, so they can listen to an expert in international politics. Minister Lavrov already then unarguably enjoyed the sort of fame he enjoys today. To remind his phone conversation with the British Foreign Secretary, during which he overstepped the bounds and most harshly talked back to his British interlocutor in an attempt to humiliate him. Such a man instructing Polish ambassadors how to do foreign policy?
Instruktorem dla polskich ambasadorów, jak mają prowadzić politykę zagraniczną.
2 months later, Lavrov arrives in Warsaw again, and again does he meet with Radosław Sikorski. 150 yards off the Officer Cadet School in Łazienki Królewskie Park, the barracks of which a group of insurgents, led by Piotr Wysocki, marched out in November 1830 to clash against the Russians. Now, on October the 28th, both gentlemen appeared in that famous area. It was part of a sequence of preparations for President Medvedev's visit in Poland, due in December 2010. What was it that Sikorski talked about with Lavrov? What information has survived after that particular visit, especially as regards the one-to-one talks? As information has been preserved?
Tutaj rozmawiano oficjalnie o różnych ogólnych kwestiach, o których już rozmawiano przy
Officially, the talks regarded different general issues which had been discussed at the ambassadors' conference. There were basically two topics. First, Sikorski asked Minister Lavrov why the Russian Federation's intelligence was active within Poland in an above-state way. Lavrov, typically of him, laughed at the Polish foreign minister, pointing out that even close friends like Israel and the United States are spying on each other. So what's the point? Second, very interestingly, Lavrov asked Sikorski in turn to explain what he actually had in mind when declaring in his Rzeczpospolita daily interview on 16th of October that he welcomed Russia as part of NATO structures.
W strukturach Paktu Północnoatlantyckiego. Sikorski chyba był zmieszany. W każdym razie
Sikorski was apparently confused. He seemed uncertain of what to say. Lavrov then responded in a typically Russian way, deriding Sikorski and saying, roughly, "Can you imagine NATO supporting Russia in its fight against Georgia in case the 2008 situation reappears?" Symptomatically, this fragment, present in the first draft memo prepared by Jarosław Bratkiewicz for Sikorski to sign, which he did, simply vanished into thin air.
notatki, którą sporządził dla Sikorskiego Jarosław Bratkiewicz, a Sikorski ją podpisał, po prostu z tego dokumentu wyparował.
It was erased?
Został wykreślony.
Incredible. Apart from the content of the talk, the public opinion has never had a chance to learn about it. We were astonished to see it here. As they were getting to that balcony where they talked, they passed by the portraits of Tsarina Catherine II and Tsar Alexander I. It's hard to think there was no reference to that at all.
Trudno wyobrazić sobie, żeby tutaj nie było jakiegoś odniesienia do tego.
What's more, Lavrov stood on that balcony exactly as I'm standing now and had a diagonal view of Catherine the Great. On his way back, he leaned a little to the left and then could see Alexander I, whom Sikorski considered a king of Poland, I believe. Oh yes, this is awesome. Russians love such symbols. But why should the Polish government and the foreign minister have fit themselves into those symbols? To me, it is all apparent, even now that years have passed. The room, the palace, which in the 19th century was taken over by the Tsarist family, which epitomizes the Tsarist rulership in this country. In that room, which initially belonged to the King of Poland and later became one of the Tsars, the meeting was held and they went out to that balcony to discuss the issues I'm talking about. The 6th of December 2010 saw Dmitry Medvedev arrive in Warsaw. Here at the presidential palace, he started his first official international visit to Poland. He was accompanied by politicians and Vladimir Putin government's ministers who arrived to settle issues within the reset agenda.
Putina, którzy załatwiali tu sprawy wpisujące się w agendę resetu.
Uważam wizytę prezydenta Miedwiediewa w grudniu 2010 roku za jedną z najważniejszych.
I consider President Medvedev's December 2010 visit to have been one of the most important visits during the Polish-Russian reset project since 2007. One of the major round of talks or discussions, not to say dialogue, between Poland and Russia of the reset stage, and this for several reasons. We should obviously remember that it was still 2010, and Russia did its best for Poland not to perceive its relationship with Russia negatively at that particular stage. Russia wanted Poland to act further on as a resonance box that tells the world stories of a democratic Russia, a country under modernization and, primarily, of its sheer innocence with regards to the Polish plane crash of April the 10th, 2010.
Katastrofę polskiego samolotu 10 kwietnia 2010 roku.
The talks between the Polish and Russian teams were held in this place, the Presidential Palace's picture hall. The talks' agenda basically comprised all the topics which have been appearing in the bilateral relations since the reset policy was launched, including those the Russian Federation cared the most about.
Na których najbardziej zależało Federacji Rosyjskiej.
After years of dry stillness in Polish-Russian relations, we have recently developed numerous contacts at top state levels of the Russian Federation and Poland, for which I am cordially grateful. This is the first official visit of a president of the Russian Federation to our country in many years. This very fact suffices to consider this visit to be of high importance, and so it is perceived by Polish public opinion. Dear Mr. President, Polish colleagues, this present visit is indeed quite a significant and important milestone in the history of Polish-Russian relations. Since our relationship had regrettably deteriorated, now the true opportunity has appeared to imbue it with a new life, or, as Mr. President put it, to open a new chapter in Russian-Polish contacts. I watched your interview for the Russian media, as you said that our relationship needed to be somewhat natural, ordinary or regular. I agree. The Polish party, once again, referred in those talks to the opportunity yielded by the ever-improving Polish-Russian relations, though it remarks in the documents that they have already become possible on the head of state level. Poland has requested Russia once again to provide the documentation of the Katyn investigation and to give back the evidence regarding the Smolensk affair, the evidence Poland owns after all. Russian Federation President Dmitry Medvedev's visit was an important element to the improvement of the atmosphere of the bilateral relations. The Russian team declare their will to fully explain the circumstances and reasons behind the bilateral relations. The Russian team declare their will to fully explain the circumstances and reasons behind the Smolensk tragedy and have announced that more evidentiary material will be provided soon. The Russian team has also pointed to the fact that certain pieces of documentation, such as regarding the airport, is presently held by the Interstate Aviation Committee. Some others still being analysed by the Russian Public Prosecutor's Office, and thus will be shared after these relevant procedures are completed. None of these issues have been settled in line with what the Polish party postulated. As regards the Smolensk investigation, Medvedev is reported to say that it had been carried out quietly and meticulously in a transparent fashion so that no doubts may arise whatsoever. The talks also covered international security topics as debated for some time by them. On behalf of President Komorowski, such talks were held by Stanisław Kozier, head of the National Security Bureau, his partner having been Nikolai Patrushev himself.
Żeby stworzyć stały format konsultacji w obszarze bezpieczeństwa, kwestie dotyczące relacji Unii Europejskiej z Federacją Rosyjską i kwestie dotyczące
The idea of setting up a standing format for security consultations, for talks on EU-Russia relations and on Poland's membership in NATO and the relations between NATO and Russia all formed a package Russia had never before offered to Poland. It in fact ensued from a concept to get Poland entangled in a sort of strategic dialogue that would encourage its authorities to share their top secrets. What Russia actually proposed, and Medvedev was the one who uttered it, was a format paving the way for Poland to consult with the Russian Federation every single step it would intend to make within the EU and NATO.
Wszystko, co Polska zamierzała w ramach Unii Europejskiej i NATO zrobić, żeby to skonsultowała z Federacją Rosyjską.
There is an essential Polish component as far as Russia's relations with the EU and NATO go. It is reasonable that a standing Polish-Russian consulting mechanism be established in respect of European security policies.
Pamiętajmy, Polska jest w tamtym czasie krajem faktycznie bezbronnym, bez stałej obecności Amerykanów na terenie Polski.
Let us remind that Poland was actually a defenseless country at that time, with no permanent presence of US troops, and, so to say, with ever-transforming or non-transforming Polish army, with no infrastructure or combat potential that would have otherwise enabled Poland to get back on its feet and enable it to defend itself in any way. This was part of a broader context of a very wide-ranging military cooperation plan between Poland and Russia.
To obejmowało siły powietrzne, to obejmowało siły morskie, to obejmowało
Air forces and navy forces were covered. Transformation of the military as a broad concept was to be monitored. Medvedev proposed things, and once he, let me put it bluntly, Radosław Sikorski, the foreign minister, wrote a secret memo to Premier Donald Tusk, declaring his full acceptance of Medvedev's project, even in a slightly extended version.
Do premiera Donalda Tuska, w którym opowiedział się jako minister spraw zagranicznych za pełną akceptacją.
Very interestingly, one of the document's readers put characteristic exclamation marks where Sikorski makes a statement, as if he had an agenda prepared on behalf of the Polish Republic's foreign ministry, allowing him to deliver the Polish-Russian consultation format proposed by Medvedev.
O tym pisze, jakby miał już przygotowaną w ogóle agendę Ministerstwa Spraw Zagranicznych Rzeczypospolitej Polskiej, która miałaby ten format, który proponuje Miedwiediew, konsultacji w zakresie bezpieczeństwa między Polską a Rosją, realizować.
Relative to the proposal to establish a standing bilateral consulting mechanism, as put forth by Russian Federation's President Dmitry Medvedev in Warsaw in the course of his talks with Mr. President and Mr. Prime Minister, I should like to inform that the initiative deserves positive response in the Foreign Ministry's opinion. Did Sikorski receive consent from Tusk as requested? The idea seems so absurd that it seemingly should have been rejected. I've got a copy of that document with a handwritten annotation reading, I recommend to make a positive decision. Sealed and signed, Tomasz Arabski. This says it all about the document and its approval by Premier Tusk's closest associate.
Akceptacji najbliższego współpracownika premiera Donalda Tuska.
To właśnie w tej sali
It was in this ballroom of the Wojciech Korolewski's palace on the water that a session of the Civic Forum was held during Medvedev's visit to Poland, starring Dmitry Medvedev and Andrzej Wajda. In his address, Andrzej Wajda said that Dmitry Medvedev has resolved to hand over to Poland the Katyn files in their entirety.
W treści swojego wystąpienia Andrzej Wajda stwierdził, że Dmitrij Miedwiediew zdecydował o przekazaniu Polsce wszystkich akt katyńskich.
Przyjmując z rąk pana prezydenta order przyjaźni.
On receiving the Russian Federation's order of friendship from Mr. President, I should like to express my deep gratitude. I do believe that it is not merely a politician's gesture on your part, sir. I am confident that your decision to thoroughly explain the Katyn massacre issue reflects the feelings and views of the people of today's Russia. You are the first president of Russia who has decided to declassify all the Katyn-related documents and to grant the deserved honor to the victims of that crime.
Oczywiście nie było to
This obviously wasn't true, though he did pass on some of those documents. What did the Poles do with them? What happened to them?
Strona polska. Jakie były ich losy?
Proszę sobie wyobrazić.
Just imagine me finding those copied 67 volumes given by Medvedev in autumn 2010, with some more appearing later, in the Central Military Archives when appointed its director in January 2016, discs in a plastic bag thrown into some cabinet.
W takiej szafie znalazłem w Centralnym Archiwum Wojskowym, kiedy zostałem dyrektorem. No to był styczeń 2016 roku.
6 years later, these documents got into a military archive, abandoned in some bags somewhere, never selected or analysed.
Tak, w takim chaosie.
There was a slip of paper in all that chaos, reading, Katyn materials received in Russia by President Komorowski. And I remember very clearly, I brought copies of those materials to the National Remembrance Institute. But there, nobody has learned of them, not even the leading experts in the Katyn massacre.
Elementem tej wizyty
During the visit, a not too highly publicized concert attended by Bronisław Komorowski and Dmitry Medvedev was held featuring the actor Artur Barczys and the musician Maciej Melenchuk, among others.
To środowisko, ten establishment, który jest...
This milieu, the establishment, was so strongly oriented towards and preaching all those lofty ideals of brotherhood and human rights, objecting violence, claiming every human's right to live, so generally opposing killing people, let alone political crime. And all of a sudden, someone resolves on political grounds that we should fraternize. I won't drill it down. It's an interesting and multi-layered thing.
My się bratamy, to już tam już nie chcę wnikać, bo to jest, jak to się mówi, wielowątkowy jest ten...
Someone decides we're supposed to fraternize, and then some others come over saying, all right, I'm going to play it. Yes, I would once say it was lame. Today, seen through all those events we're discussing, I'd name it a disgrace.
obok części
Apart from the artistic event, the visit's agenda featured a banquet at the presidential palace.
W Pałacu Prezydenckim. tym
The
przyjęciu
party was
wzięli udział
attended
nie
not
tylko
only
wybrawcy
by
najważniejszych
top-level
funkcje
ministers,
polityczne, ministrowie,
heads of
szefowie
central
urzędów
offices,
centralnych, nie
actors
tylko
and
aktorzy
celebs,
i celebryci,
but virtually
ale w
the
zasadzie
top
cała
political brass that
polityczna
ruled
wierchuszka
Poland at that
rządząca
time.
wówczas Polską.
The event
Przyjęcie
ended with
zakończyło
cordial
się
hugs and
serdecznymi
encouragements to meet
uściskami
again.
i zaproszeniami do kolejnych spotkań.
Mr. Komorowski,
i
President of the Republic of
zapowiadający
Poland,
ciąg dalszy,
cheered Saddle
również
Up
w kwestiach
in Russian
wojskowych,
as a harbinger of
rosyjskim
story to be
okrzykiem
continued,
na koni.
including
który
in its
wzniósł
military aspect.
Prezydent Rzeczpospolitej Bronisław Komorowski.
Kiedy jesteś blisko wszystkich naszych myśli, staje się realne to, co nam się przyśni, i wszystkie słowa wypowiedziane, bo jesteś naszym wrogiem albo naszym kompanem.